Hey everyone, and welcome to Voices of Change, a podcast where we dive into the people, protests, and pivotal moments that help shape the fight for civil rights in America. Today, I'm taking you on a journey through the three powerful events that didn't just make headlines, they made history. Together, they show us how ordinary people used extraordinary courage to demand justice. We'll start in Montgomery, Alabama, where a simple bus ride became the spark of something much bigger. Let's begin with the Montgomery bus boycott. In December of 1955, Rosa Parks was riding the bus home after work when she was told to give up her seat for a white passenger. She refused. Her quiet resistance led to a loud response. Over 40,000 African Americans stopped using city buses altogether. For over a year, they walked, carpooled, and stood their ground, even in the face of violence, arrests, and threats. The boycott wasn't just about buses. It was about dignity. Local organizations like the NAACP and the Women's Political Council led the charge, and a young preacher named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. rose to national prominence with his message of nonviolence resistance. The Supreme Court eventually ruled that bus segregation was unconstitutional, making this boycott one of the first major victories of the movement. But the fight didn't stop there. If the buses were a local battleground, the next struggle would take the fight on the road. Literally. That brings us to the Freedom Rides of 1961. Imagine sitting side by side on a bus, black and white passengers traveling through the South, knowing that violence could break out at any stop. That's exactly what happened when members of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, along with activists from SNCC, decided to test whether the federal government would enforce its own rulings against segregated travel. The Freedom Riders boarded buses from Washington, D.C., heading from New Orleans, purposefully sitting in seats that violated local segregation laws. In Alabama, things turned brutal. One bus was firebombed. Riders were beaten by angry mobs, and police? They stood by and watched. Despite the danger, more and more people joined the rides, about 450 by the end of the summer. They were beaten, jailed, and threatened, but they never gave up. Eventually, federal officials were forced to act, and those whites-only signs came down in bus terminals across the South. The Freedom Rides proved the courage on wheels could drive real change. And finally, we arrive at one of the most iconic moments of the entire movement, the March on Washington. On August 28, 1963, more than 200,000 people gathered in Washington, D.C. It was one of the largest demonstrations the Capitol had ever seen. But it wasn't chaotic. It was carefully planned with support from groups like NAACP, SNCC, SCLC, and labor unions. People of all backgrounds stood shoulder to shoulder, holding signs, singing songs, and demanding jobs and freedom. At the Lincoln Memorial, Dr. King gave his legendary "I Have a Dream" speech, calling for a future where his children and all children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Unlike some early protests, this one didn't involve violence or arrests. But it was powerful in a different way. It captured the moral urgency of the movement and helped build support for what would become the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The march showed that peace and unity could be just as forceful as protests in the streets. So what did these events tell us about the strategies that work? In each case, whether